Now, encryption technology startup CipherStash has raised $3.3 million in a seed round as it looks to crack the US market. The startup is an end-to-end searchable encrypted data storage platform co-founded by Expert360's former engineering VP, Dan Draper, and he joins us to tell us more about the company and those international expansion plans. Dan, great to have you on. Welcome to Startup Daily. Congrats on the raise. Tell us a little bit more about CipherStash because it's international, or it's Australian Cyber Week, and cybersecurity is at the forefront of everyone's minds this week. You guys are tackling it in your own unique way.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Simon. Look, we think of CipherStash as the most secure place for PII. So PII is personal identifiable information. And you think about every time you go online to buy a pair of jeans, book a doctor's appointment, apply for a loan, every time you do that, you're giving a company some of your data, some of your PII data. Now, those companies have a responsibility to look after that information, to not let it leak. And yet, unfortunately, in the media, in the news, we see data leaks and breaches all the time. So much so that I think we become a little bit desensitized to it. But these are real problems, not only for us as individuals losing access to our data, but also to companies. In fact, companies spend about, or cost the company about $180 every single record that is breached in a data leak. That's through insurance, through reputation, cleanup, and so forth. And in fact, finance companies spend about 1% of their revenue, total revenue, on protecting sensitive data from cyber attacks and cybersecurity incidents. Now, what makes CipherStash so interesting is the way that we store the data. Normally, when you store that data in a database as an organization, you can't encrypt the data. Now, encryption is a great way to protect the data, but it also means that data is not searchable. So if you've got a bunch of user records stored in your customer database, for example, if those records are encrypted, they're safe, but it means I can't look them up, say, by email address, phone number, or all users that have signed up in the last 30 days. And so the fact of the matter remains that most organizations simply don't encrypt. So CipherStash is a solution to that. It's sort of like having your cake and eating it too. We can fully encrypt the data, but it is still searchable. So it's usable in the same way that companies have become accustomed, but it really massively elevates the security of or the protection levels that we put on data. So understandably, customers are very excited about that, and investors too.
It also means you can look in the fridge to see if there's any more cake without anyone else being allowed to look in the fridge. Now, this 3.3 million raise, Airtree backed you, and you've got a US VC helping you too. Tell us about this focus on the US market, because obviously there's massive potential in what you're doing.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've had a global focus right from the very get-go. And interestingly enough, those data breach figures that I quoted, that's the world average. They're actually higher in the US. So the stakes are even higher in America. In fact, we flipped up. A lot of startups go through this process of flipping up where they incorporate a US head company. And we did that in the very early days because we see massive potential in the United States. Of course, it's tricky at the moment. We've struggled to get physically over there, but certainly now that our borders are opening up, we plan on getting over and visiting customers over there. And US is a massive market. It's a massive market with a big problem. So we see huge opportunities for our offering in the US and globally for that matter. And in fact, anywhere there is highly regulated markets, and particularly an increase in compliance requirements. The EU is a great example with the GDPR. California has a similar legislation now, and we see other countries and other jurisdictions rather picking up compliance requirements like that as well. So this really is a global opportunity.
Dan, I mentioned at the start your previous career, but I'm fascinated as the CEO of CipherStash. What led you down this path and decided to pursue this idea with your co-founders?
Yeah, well, I mean, this was a problem I've had as a CTO and a VP of engineering leading technology teams for years. At Expert360, we were servicing the needs of large corporates, the likes of IAG, Vodafone, Combank, and so forth. And they're all the same. They would always ask us these questions. What are you doing to protect our data, the data that we have to manage on behalf of our customers? And, we were servicing these corporates as our customers, and they would ask us the same things. They were deeply concerned about how data is being managed. And I honestly felt that the contemporary solutions, the current solutions, were just insufficient. We'd always have to make trade-offs or compromises, and every person that's running a dev team or operating a company that suffers these kinds of challenges has to make those same kinds of trade-offs. And it really led me down this path of discovery. I did some more study. I did some postgraduate work at Stanford, and came across some research that came out of that university that is really around this idea of searchable encryption. And it sort of sent me down this path of discovery that took about 3 years to develop the original prototype for CipherStash, which I started showing to investors late last year. And at that point, I realized that we had something pretty special. But it's been a labor of love. It's been a real passion of mine, but it's really born from genuine problems that I faced myself in my career.
Sounds a little bit like the unicorn has just been set free in the paddock. It just needs to get its up to full speed now. Now, I'm really interested in your opinion, given it is Australian Cyber Week. How are we tracking in this country in terms of our preparedness to deal with cyber issues? We've heard the stories, we've heard the ransomware, the hacking, everything. As you said, there have been countless data leaks over and over. Some of our biggest tech companies have experienced them. I know you're one of the solutions, but are we sort of on top of the problem, or are we sort of always playing catch up?
To be frank, I don't think we are. I think at the moment we are in a losing battle, and Australia is certainly a victim of that battle loss, if you like. So are many other developed and developing nations. Now, there's sort of two broad areas of cybersecurity you can think about. There's the cybersecurity of an individual, dealing with passwords and your online banking information and so forth. And then there's also corporate responsibility. And you can think of that as technology builders, application developers and so forth. Now, there is an organization called OWASP, which publishes a list of top 10 security risks that software developers face. Now, they recently published a new version of this list a couple of months ago. And it turns out that the two top most important things when it comes to cybersecurity are encryption and access control. And the sad fact is that most developer teams building applications right now do a very poor job at that. And it pains for me to say that because I've led teams and I'm a developer myself, but it's a really hard problem to solve. And so I think we as an industry need to really invest in training. We need to invest in awareness, and we need to generally lift our game when it comes to all secure application building, but in particular those top two, encryption and access control systems. So, I think there's hope. I think we can get there, but it's really going to take a massive step up from the industry overall before we can get on top of this issue.
Dan Draper, thank you so much for your insights. Wise words there indeed. Congrats again on your race, and thanks for joining us on Startup Daily.
No worries. Thanks very much for having me.